Today we continue with our third series, Old School. If you didn't get the opportunity to watch last week's episode, I encourage you to go back and watch it. My wife brought a powerful message on worshiping under extreme conditions. So if you haven't watched it, go ahead and watch it and stay up to date with this third series. Today we're going to continue with the series. So my wife and I, we really like watching sitcoms during our dinner time. So what normally ends up happening is we'll come home, we'll get things ready for dinner, we'll talk about our day, and then when it comes time to eating, we'll watch an episode of our TV show. And for the most part, it's sitcoms, 20 to 30-minute shows. We'll watch it. If I ask you what your favorite sitcom is, I'm sure you have a list of things that you love to watch. You love to binge watch. You watch over and over. You watch here, you watch there, you watch later. We all have that. So when we first got married, the first few months of our marriage, we were watching Friends. So we watched all 10 seasons of Friends. We started with episode 1 of the first season. Then we got all the way through the 10 seasons and we finished watching it. It was a great show. Honestly, one of my favorites. Loved it. After we finished watching all 10 seasons of Friends, we're like, okay, what's our next show going to be that we're going to watch? So we started watching The Big Bang Theory. And that one, we're still watching it. We're barely on the 10th season. But I've grown to really like that show. That show follows, if you're not aware of what the show is, it follows a group of about 7 people. They all have their different careers. But in particular, there's a group of physicists. This group of physicists they're funny. They're a great group of guys. There is an astrophysicist, there's an experimental physicist, and then there's a theoretical physicist. Now, my favorite character, I will be honest, is the theoretical physicist because this guy is just hilarious. If you watch this show and you see him interact with everybody else, it is hilarious because the interesting thing about this guy is that he always has a rebuttal for everything. He always has an answer for everything. If you get into an argument with him, he's going to have an answer to rebuttal. And for the most part, he's kind of a know-it-all. He knows everything. He's lived through everything. He has experience with everything. He just pretty much knows everything. He's a know-it-all. And in the show, it makes it funny. I mean, it just makes it hilarious just seeing how he interacts. But do you know somebody like that in real life? Somebody that is actually not that funny in real life. When you try talking to them, they always have a comment. They've lived through everything. They know everything. They're just, so they just know it all. Do you know somebody like that? Now, to be honest, have you ever been like that? Have you ever been in a position where you feel like you know that you're right, even though people around you may not agree? You just feel like you know it all. That is common in certain seasons of our life. But one thing that I find interesting is that in the Bible we find a very similar situation of the person that seems to feel like they know what is going on, and they know they feel like they know more than they actually do in that moment. We've been talking about Job over the past few episodes of this third series. And we've been seeing how this man has suffered. We've seen all that he has gone through, the losses that he's dealt with, the health concerns that he's dealt with. We've seen that over the past few weeks. And we see that in this process, he is venting. He is venting about what he's going through, which we all do. It's important to vent, to express what we're going through. Sometimes it can be to your friends, it can be to your family. It should always be to the Lord, where we vent. But it comes to a point where what he's going through is so strong that he actually begins to accuse God of being his enemy. Imagine this: he's going through something so intense that he makes a comment that is deep. Look at what he says. He's talking about God, and he's going through his frustration. This is chapter 6, verse 4. He goes, "The arrows of the Almighty are in me." He's telling Lord, like your arrows, man, they have perforated my skin. They've penetrated. They are hurting and they're in me. This is what he says regarding God. He feels like God has been his enemy. And for many chapters, Job is complaining. He's complaining. And, and in other occasions, it seems like he's even doubting the Lord. He's like, what's going on in here? And for 2 chapters, God responds back to Job. God responds back to all of his complaints and to all of his things. But in chapter 40, verse 2, God presents a challenge that I think is interesting. Job chapter 40, verse 2 says the following. This is God speaking. He says, "Do you still want to argue with the Almighty? You are God's critic, but do you have all the answers?" That is that is a powerful challenge. He's saying, do you still want to argue with the Almighty? You are God's critic. Do you have the answers? Can you respond if you're fighting with the Almighty? For many chapters, Job is complaining and accusing God. And now God challenges him. We have all been through times in our life where we're just complaining and complaining, like, Lord, I'm going through this, I'm going through that. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense, and we begin to complain and accuse the Lord, and be like, Lord, well, you should be doing things this way. Well, you should be doing things that way, and it can be very, very dangerous because we begin to accuse the Almighty One, the omnipotent one, the omniscient one. And it comes to a point where we need to step away from complaining and begin to trust. Where we need to step away from accusing God and begin to trust, because there is something powerful of, instead of complaining, of putting your trust in one who knows more than you do. Of putting your trust in an Almighty One that was here before time. There is something powerful. And I want to encourage you at this moment to step away from complaining and put your trust in God, because there are many benefits of putting your trust on the Almighty One. First of all, why should we trust instead of complain? Because God is just. Repeat that with me. God is just. One of the moral attributes of God is justice, is righteousness. He is a just God. And Job accuses God of being unjust when God is just. And many times we can go through that as well, where we want to accuse God of being unjust. God, this is unjust. This, I don't understand why. Why is it that I'm going through this and I see this person, and this person is seem to living their best life. This person is like, they're just doing things so good right now. They're having success in everything they're doing. What's going on? Why? Why? You are being unjust. It's unfair. I don't understand why this is like this. But what I like is what the book of Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews, tells us. In Hebrews chapter 6, verse 10, he says, "For God is not unjust to forget your work and your labor of love, which you have shown towards his name." The writer of Hebrews is telling you know what? God is not unjust. God is not going to forget your love for him. God is not going to forget what you've done. God is not going to forget that you have suffered. God is not going to forget that through all this you have cried. God is not going to forget any of that. And even though at this moment it may feel like things are unjust, where things are not going the way you want it to, but God is not unjust. God is guided by justice and by truth. So because he is guided by these things, and because his character is a character of justice, of truth, we can be assured that something greater is going to come out of all of this. People can be unjust, but God is not unjust. And we can have the certainty that instead of complaining, we can trust in God because he is not unjust. Say with me, God is just. The second thing, which I absolutely love, and why we should trust instead of complain, is because of this. God sees our after while we see our now. He sees our after while we see our now. Our perception is our reality. When what we're seeing in the moment is what we feel is our reality. When you're going through something, you are blinded by what's around you. You are blinded to see beyond that, and all you do is you're seeing what's in the moment. We have all done that. We have all gone through that. We get some bad news. We're going through something, and what we're perceiving is our reality. I'm perceiving suffering. That is my reality, and I will not leave that. I'm gonna be living in that reality. That's what I'm going through right now. And what Job was seeing was suffering. We go through that. We see suffering. We see what we're going through, and sometimes that causes us to not put importance into anything else, not to see beyond our trials and our tribulations. But what I like is that while we're seeing our now, While we're seeing what we're going through at this moment, God sees our tomorrow. See, Job didn't realize that God saw the yesterday where Satan asked God to be able to torment Job. God sees the now. Job is going through his suffering, and God sees the tomorrow where he's going to be multiplied, where he's going to receive more than what he had. And to change the perspective, since you're seeing me on that side, God sees the yesterday. Satan wanting to attack Job. God sees the today, Job suffering, and God sees the tomorrow, the brighter future, the glory days, what he's going to do in the life of Job. And that's what I love, that you may be going through something right now, but God knows that all you're seeing is your suffering. But on the other side of that, in the tomorrow, there's going to be multiplication. There's going to be duplication. There's going to be more than what you could have even imagined. Everything you prayed for, you're going to see it come to pass in the tomorrow. So that's why we need to just trust the Lord. Trust the Lord that even though I only see my today, He sees my tomorrow. I'm seeing suffering today. He sees glory tomorrow. So we should trust instead of complain, because what we see our now, God sees our tomorrow. And lastly, why we should trust and not complain is because God is not only the creator, but He is the preserver as well. One of the questions that God asked Job, and He actually asks it multiple times, is, where were you? Job, where were you when I created the heavens and the earth? Job, where were you when I separated, the waters from the land? Where were you when I created all this, when I created these limits, when I created all that? Where were you? What God is telling Job is that before he existed, God created all this. And God created all this years and years ago. But guess what? It's still working today. What God created yesterday is still working today. Why? Because God doesn't only create things, but He preserves them. He keeps them. So we can have the trust and the certainty that if God created you, that if you believe that He is your creator, which He is our creator, that means He created you and He can preserve you. He is keeping you. That lets me know that there is nothing that is out of His control. There's nothing outside of His control. There is nothing that He does not have control over. So that means what I'm going through right now is under His control, and it hasn't left His control. It's not out of His control. What I'm going through today, what I'll be going through tomorrow, any other circumstance, is not outside of His control. And if He created me, He's going to continue preserving me to the end of my days. Job, thousands of years ago, he recognized that it is easier to trust God than to complain. Why? Because God knows more than we can ever know. God is the Almighty, the Omnipotent. We may feel like we know it all in this season, but God knows more, and He sees the tomorrow. That's why it is easier for us to trust. And this is a lesson that we can learn from the life of Job, to just trust in God. We may feel like we have all the answers, but at the end of the day, the only one that has all the answers is God. And when we put our trust in Him, we can have the certainty that I may be going through something, but He is just. He sees my tomorrow while I only see my today. And I know that He created and He continues to preserve me. So I want to encourage you to put your trust in God, because greater is to come. We will see you next week.